Hello traders, welcome to the FX Entities channel where today I'll be doing another weekly forecast. If you're new to the channel, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and like the video. The order of this forecast will begin by myself looking at the VIX to see how sentiment was in the previous week and how it may affect the markets in this coming week. After that, I will then look at the dollar index to see where the major levels are and how prices are reacting to it in respect to the sentiment on the VIX. After that, I will then dive into the forecast by looking at the currency pairs such as the EURUSD, the Usdcad, the pound dollar. Then after, I will move on to the indices, focusing on the US100 as well as the US30. After that, I will look at oil, then conclude off with Bitcoin. With that being said, let me dive into the forecast. So starting off with the VIX, so we saw fear rising on Thursday and Friday, and we were in a risk of coming into the last strict trading window. So right now we saw the fear come down. However, on Thursday, Friday, fear returned. So last week we can say that there was a majority of risk off sentiment, and therefore in this next coming week we may see it continue. So right now we may see safe havens possibly strengthening in opposition to these high risk asset classes, including the euro as well as the pound. With that being said, I will now move on to the dollar index. So if you look at the dollar index, we can see that previously the dollar opened over here, and since then a doji candle has formed within this supply zone. So right now it's a matter of looking at sentiment, and therefore as sentiment right now is suggesting we in a risk off market condition, I would like to believe that we may see a continued upward momentum on the dollar, and with that happening the dollar may strengthen as well as other safe haven currencies or asset classes in opposition to these high risk asset classes. So as it stands from my end, I would want to see any pullback into daily demand zones here. Let me switch to the daily time frame, and in the daily time frame you can see as it stands there is a demand zone which is situated here, as well as a supply zone which is situated right there. So right now again prices are in a tight place in terms of the dollar index. However, due to sentiment, I would like to believe that prices may bounce off from this level. So coming into Monday, if this risk off does play off in this coming week, there's a possibility that prices may pull back here, and if they do, I would look to go in long. However, if we do move back to a risk off market condition, it's important to consider what may happen since we're situated in a level of supply. So prices could sell off from here or over here. If prices do break above, then probably we could look for a potential setup here. So with that being said, I will now move on to the currencies. So looking at the Euro USD, we can see that this supply zone here has been taken out, so prices could be looking to sell all the way up here, but again the markets could create a new level of supply if it doesn't reach here. So from my end, that is not what I'm focused on as it stands. What I'm focused on is looking for sell trades due to this risk off sentiment. And if we move down to the daily time frame, we can see that possible areas for shorting the euro could be said to be here, as there's a risk off sentiment. So right now I wouldn't want to look at this zone any longer due to the fact that we have since seen engulfing structure over here. So again, there is a possibility that prices could bounce off from this demand zone here before pushing and testing the zone here. Again, it's all based on risk sentiment from my end. So if this risk off sentiment does hold out, then probably we may see a push to the downside. If that doesn't happen, possibly we may first see a pull back to the zone before a sell off, or rather a break above here, and probably this level here could play out. But from my end, the risk of sentiment is suggesting that prices on the Euro USD are likely to go short or sell, if I might say. If there's a change in risk sentiment, prices will definitely look to bounce off here or over here, as we saw on the dollar index that there is a zone over here, so it could be respected, which could result in the Euro USD rallying all the way up to the supply zone before it actually sells off. So with that being said, I will now move on to the USD CAD. And if you look at the USDCAD, you can see that prices have continued to sit in the supply zone here. And since then, we can say that prices are in indecision, as there hasn't been any move to the upside or to the downside. From my end, we're still in a risk off sentiment, as I've previously mentioned. So it is highly possible to see the dollar continuing to rally in opposition to the Canadian dollar. So again, there are some developments happening within oil, which the Canadian economy is heavily reliant on. So I'll go through it when we reach oil and explain my thoughts. So right now, from my end, prices during this risk off may look for a potential area of demand to rally all the way up to these higher levels of supply. Until then, if sentiment does change, we may see prices starting to sell off, but that is not yet in play. So from my end, if we go down to the daily time frame, we can see that we are currently situated in our level of demand. Actually, the level of demand which I previously drew out in my forecast held out, and prices are now moving higher. So right now, there's been a new zone which I could say has been created right here. Therefore, if prices do return here, we may see a rally. So there is also a hidden demand over here, and again, it may result in a rally. It's important to also note that right here, there is also an argument which could be had that there is a engulfing structure over here which has coincided with this weekly zone. So right now we can say that this is a valid daily demand, outside of the fact that it is also one which worked during this risk of sentiment. So this one could work anytime, and again, it has already worked once. So from my end, it's a matter of first seeing how things play out in this coming week. Since we in a risk of sentiment, prices are likely to continuing rallying. So what I would be looking for is for prices to return to this zone here, and I would look for confirmations or setup in order to look for long trades, which I will post in my Discord page. The link is in the description, as well as the pinned comment on the comment section. So with that being said, if we do see a risk of sentiment changing back to risk on, we may see prices potentially beginning to sell off from this zone here. If we have broken above it, when that happens, then I'll first wait to see if there is a daily engulfing structure which will tell me that prices are likely heading down. So as it stands, things right now are looking in favor of the dollar against the Canadian dollar. So with that being said, I will now move on to the pound dollar. So if you look at the pound dollar, we can see that this supply zone here has been tested for the third week in a row, and right now again we can see that doji type candle has been formed, or an indecision candle has been formed, as we can see with these 2 weeks. So right now, from my end, I would want to believe that prices right now are likely to go down due to this risk of sentiment, and since prices have closed above the high of this bearish candle, I could assume that there is a new weekly zone which has been established. So from my end, I would look for pullbacks in this coming week back here for engulfing structure, or bullish engulfing structure, to look for further setups and confirmations in those zones in order to look for long trades. As it stands, again, we in an area of supply which coincides with the risk of sentiment which is in favor of the dollar. So right now the dollar and other safe haven asset classes are likely to see some strength in the place of these high risk asset classes, as well as the euro and the pound. So as it stands right now, we can see that prices are reacting off this zone here. We saw on Friday prices did print a bearish candle. So right now again we may see further push to the upside, and prices could move down if we still maintain this risk off sentiment. So from my end, again, if we do find a pullback back into the zone, I would look for short entries. As it stands, if prices are right here and sentiment changes, then I will look to buy over here. But if that hasn't occurred, then from my end it's best to sit out and see how the markets develop in the coming weeks. So I'm selling the pound if the setup does occur, and if sentiment changes to risk on, I will only look for a trade all the way down here, and I will take profits when sentiment changes, as there is no telling whether prices will hunt my position before actually respecting this supply zone all the way up here. So with that being said, I will now move on to the indices. And looking at the NASDAQ, we can see that prices since then pull back into this weekly supply zone here, and right now they're situated in a daily demand zone where there's a psychological zone. But from my end, as I previously said, I am quite skeptical on buying the indices due to the fact that last year there was tapering happening, and as a result there was a stop in the quantitative easing. So I think from my end we are seeing the results of it, and as such prices are selling off. So there isn't any interest in my end to look for long trades, although there are possible demand areas where prices could bounce off it. I am not interested in it until there is a major change in terms of the central bank monetary policy, or rather the Fed, in that regard. So right now, since they tapering, I'm not looking to really buy until I see prices at least breaking above a trend line or a downtrend line. In that case, in order to look for a long trade. So right now my bias is to the short side, and again, I'm not a person who's interested in shorting the indices. So if you move down to the daily time frame, there hasn't been anything much interesting from my end. However, there is a supply zone which has been created. Those who are interested, it could offer an opportunity to look for short trades. But from my end, I still think that if this sentiment does play out or continues to play out, we may see a break of this daily demand zone, and prices may look to move in towards this demand zone here. So I will move on to the US30. So if you look at the US30, we can see that there's since been a weekly supply zone which has been created right here. And from my end, again, the same thing which I said on the NASDAQ is likely to play out as well as on the Dow Jones. So from my end, I would not be looking for any trades due to the fact that I am unsure on where prices are going to end up in the terms of sentiment. So as things stand, again, if we find a pullback up to the supply zone here, we may start to look for setups in order to short the US30. But again, I'm not looking to short, I'm just saying it in respect to sentiment. So again, right now we're situated in a level of demand here, and it's a matter of seeing whether it holds, or rather sentiment plays out and it sees it being taken out for a potential move further down to this demand zone here. So from my end, I am not interested in buying the US30 at all. Right now I'm thinking of at least removing one between the US30 and the NASDAQ in my forecast and replacing it either by gold or silver. So right now it's a matter of seeing which one of the two are the least interesting and replace it with one of the ones which are interesting. So with that being said, I will now move on to oil. So if we look at oil, we can see that prices removed one of the supply zones here, but respected one of the ones which was situated around there. So as I've said in my past two forecasts, all I was looking for was a bearish candle in order to tell me whether I should start to look for short trades to the short side. So right now we can see that as played out. So from my end, I am now switching my bias to short. So right now I would be looking for pullbacks on the daily time frame back to the supply zone in order to look for sell trades. Again, this is not investment advice, it's educational content based on how I look to trade the market. So if you looking for financial advice, seek a financial advisor in order to find advice. So from my end, again, right now, if we move down to the daily time frame, we can see that there has been a daily supply zone here. I would look to take. So right now what I would be looking for is for prices to continuing a rally all the way up to this supply zone here, and I would look for short trades when that occurs. So right now it's a matter of waiting to see what happens on the next coming week in order to look for short trades on oil. So with that being said, there hasn't been much from my end. Again, I could still be wrong and prices could respect these demand zones here. So I'm just going off what I've been looking for the past few weeks. So right now the setup is valid. If we see prices break above here, then I'm wrong. Prices could continue rallying, and as such I would continue to look for that weekly bearish candle in order to look for short trades, as long as I think that oil is in a risk off market condition. So with that being said, I will now move on to Bitcoin. Lastly, if we look at Bitcoin, we can see that nothing significant happened, or rather in terms of long trades, what happened was that prices sold off. So from my end, again, I did say that any pullback here would I would only look for a buying entry all the way down here. Again, it's important to note that if prices do reach here and the data which I use to establish a bias tells me that prices are likely to head down, then I will discard the zone here and I will be of the view that prices are likely to go down. So as it stands, I would like to believe that it's too early for myself to say where prices are likely to go on Bitcoin. So when that happens, I will post it on my Discord page or my Discord server. And this is the Discord server. I'll likely post it in the risk sentiment opinion pieces, as well as the trade report in terms of whether there is a trade which I would like to take. So with that being said, I will now move on to the daily time frame. So if you look at the daily time frame, we can see that again prices have taken out this demand zone here, and right now there isn't anything much which could stop it. There is another demand zone here, but it's not one which I would take personally. The one which I would look to take is the one all the way down here. So again, it's a matter of just seeing whether that setup is in play, as well as the data is in support of the move to the upside. As it stands for this month, it is supporting the move to the upside, but if the month ends and the data is suggesting that we are likely to sell off, then I would look for pullbacks up to a weekly zone in order to look for short trades. So that is my take on Bitcoin. So this brings me to the end of the forecast, and I hope that you enjoyed it. Please don't forget to hit the subscribe button and also like the video if you enjoyed it. With that being said, FX Entities signing out.